So hello, and welcome to Truth You Can Wake Up To. I'm Samuel William, on the 13th of March 2012. So my thesis for this episode is that you are an anarchist. Don't believe me? Well, listen on. Not only are you an anarchist, but you have pride in your anarchy. In fact, without anarchy, you would be sad. You would be miserable. You would feel powerless. Now, what am I talking about? The word anarchy is a perfect example of doublespeak. This word has been changed from its true meaning into something else to serve those who wish to stay in control. Of course, we've all heard of the word monarchy, which simply means a system of centralized control. Anarchy means no centralized control. Now imagine you've woken up on a sunny morning. You're going to go down to the park. Now you open up your cupboard. Which shoes shall I wear today? Shall I wear the red ones, and I can skip through the park? Or shall I wear the blue ones, and I can stroll? Now that is a perfectly anarchic situation. It's an anarchic shoe situation, I grant you, but it's perfectly anarchic. You would not expect the government or the Queen to get involved in which shoes you wear. Just as you would not expect them to get involved with which friends you choose or what you have for dinner. If the government did get involved in those decisions, you can't be friends with that person. Or you can't have baked beans on Thursdays. We would feel fundamentally that our freedom had been taken away from us, and you'd sit there on a Thursday chomping down on something other than beans with a very big frown on, and you would feel, if only anarchy was rife. Now, of course, I'm being a bit silly, but I'm trying to illustrate that we pride our personal anarchy. Now, if you look up anarchy in the dictionary, it has two entirely separate meanings. The first, a state of disorder due to absence or non-recognition of authority. And the second definition, absence of government and absolute freedom of the individual, regarded as a political ideal. A political ideal? Surely we want a political ideal, but we have democracy. Is that a political ideal? Well, look it up in the dictionary. It says, a system of government by the whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives. Who are the eligible members of a state? Is it the richest? The poorest? Those who could speak better than others? What about multinational corporations? Are they eligible members of the state? Plus, the definition doesn't even mention anything about democracy being a political ideal. Now, I think if you went out onto the street, you stopped an average passerby, and you said to them, hey, do you believe in war? Do you want war? Do you like what's going on in the Middle East? I imagine most of them will say, no, I don't agree with war, especially as it's being waged in the Middle East. Doesn't really seem to make much sense, and I wish they would stop. And if the majority of people actually want the wars to stop, would they actually stop? Which begs the question, are we in a democracy at all? Now, there are lots of theorists on the idea of anarchy, and you can look them up. There are advocate groups for what is called a stateless society, and that very concept sends a shiver down most people's spines. What on earth would we do without the state? Well, the anarchists' argument is that we would have peace. Why? Because the most violence in our lives comes from the state. Now, the main argument for anarchism is this. There is a gun in the room. Now, this comes from various people, but one of the most heard voices on this is a guy called Stefan Molyneux, which you may or may not have come across. If you haven't come across him, do look him up. It's a Stefbot on YouTube. Now, the gun in the room is the whole idea that there is actually no such thing as the government. All there is a group of human beings. The government is just a word that we attach to this set of human beings who have the monopoly on violence. They are allowed to use violence to get what they want. Any other group that tries to use violence to, say, extract money out of people or to get what they want, that's called crime, organised crime, the mafia, the gang culture. But the government has a special license. Now, the idealism of anarchy is that things should be voluntary. And you could always say, well, you know, if we had to volunteer our money to pay for things like roads and schools and hospitals and all of that kind of stuff, it'll never get done. But that argument is flawed in quite a few ways, because roads preceded the system of government. Education preceded the system of government. Caring for people is something we do because people need to be cared for. And if we truly believe we are in a democracy where things get done because the majority of people want them done, then surely the majority of people would get them done without somebody stepping in the way, forcing people to pay for things. Just look at tax, for example. We all wonder where our tax goes. We wonder whether it's spent properly, or is it being spent on things that we don't really want it to be spent on? Is it being used to fund dictators in South African countries? Well, historically, actually, yes. Is it being used to buy cluster bombs, which are illegal under international law, and then sprinkled upon civilized areas in Iraq and Afghanistan? Well, historically, yes. Is it being used to deindustrialize the country and send jobs abroad, and to bail out banks that are too big to fail but are essentially stealing the wealth of the nation? Yes. We question these things within a democracy, yet never really get a decent answer. For example, the government is proceeding with illegal wars. Now, if you disagree morally, you should be able to stop funding it. Otherwise, you are going against your moral principles by funding mass murder. So, you should be able to stop funding mass murder if you want to. Now, that's a moral principle that I think everybody essentially holds in their heart. Now, the uncomfortable truth is that this group of people that we call the government are pursuing violence against people in other countries. And as we pay our taxes, we are funding that violence. Now, if you decide to stop paying them money for doing this, morally, then the violence actually gets turned towards you. Because you will first be threatened by a brown notice that comes through your door. If you don't pay attention to that threat, then a group of human beings in blue costumes that we call the police will abduct you, kidnap you, that we call being arrested, and they will put you in a cage that we call a prison. Now, if you try and escape from that prison, you will be shot. You will lose your life. If you choose to accept your punishment and you give in to their violence, what we call being reformed, they will release you under the condition that you carry on funding the international violence. Now, solutions are out there. The theories proposed by people like Stefan Molyneux are proven to work. Anarchy works in our everyday experience, but for some reason we fear an absence of force to run our affairs. But we must, at all times, analyse the truth. Thank you for listening. I've been Samuel William, and this has been Truth You Can Wake Up To.